What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith, and we are almost through with Week 3. By the time you're listening to this, Week 3 will be wrapped up in the NFL. Coach, what's going on, man?
Nothing, man. I felt like it always feels like this to me. We spend so much time with the buildup, and you're waiting for the season to come and waiting for it to come, and then all of a sudden you just start ripping through the calendar, and like it's going to be Week 4 of the season in a heartbeat. So that's I don't know. I guess that's just the anticipation is always so exciting, and then it gets here and it's sudden.
Yeah, I think anything that is anticipated has that feel to it, whether it's a holiday, whether it's a vacation, and for us, it's football. And then when it gets here, like, damn, how are we through 3 weeks already? But we are. So let's talk about Week 3. There was a marquee matchup. A lot of people would call it must-watch TV, and that was Baltimore going to Dallas. Baltimore, the Ravens win 28-25 in a game where the Cowboys trailed 28-6 in the fourth quarter before rallying to make things respectable. Pretty darn close. Baltimore trampled the Dallas defense, rushing for 274 yards. Does the result in this game tell you more about the Ravens or the Cowboys? This is a tough question to start.
It is a tough question. I mean, I could definitely pick both sides. I'm going to pick the Cowboys. They had that really nice win in Week 1 in Cleveland, which I think at the time looked a little bit better maybe than it does now. But you thought like, okay, well, hey, they've tied up their loose ends. They got CeeDee Lamb signed. They got Dak Prescott signed. Now they can just kind of focus on football. And then they go home to Dallas and get smoked by New Orleans. In that game, the Saints rushed for 190 yards. And then yesterday or Sunday against the Ravens, they give up 274 yards. They've given them almost 900 yards of total offense in the last 2 weeks. I mean, that is, and this was supposed to be an elite defense. I mean, They got some big names. You brought in Mike Zimmer, who's a really well-respected defensive coordinator, and they have just gotten absolutely thrashed on the defensive side of the ball at home the last 2 weeks. And I mean, that for me, if you can't stop the run, you are in trouble. Because the NFL is unforgiving in that way. Everybody talks about it being a passing league, and it is. But when you can't stop the run and you now have to commit extra resources to stopping the run, bring those safeties down, you are making yourself extremely vulnerable to the pass. So it feels like when you can't stop the run, it feels like you're hemorrhaging. And like you don't, how do you stop the bleeding? So they got to figure that out. And I don't know what the answer is, man, but it wasn't just Baltimore yesterday. It was New Orleans the week before. They're being exposed on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, I'll go the other side, and I'll say Baltimore. I was with some Ravens fans this past weekend, and they were talking to me, as they always do, about football. And I try not to talk to Ravens fans as much as I can, but they're family, and so I had to. And so I was talking with them, and they said, they're not very good, talking about Baltimore. I said, they're going to be fine. I said, I hope you all realize that. Like, they're going to be okay. I said, you think about Week 1, Isaiah Likely toe is barely out of bounds against the Chiefs on Thursday night. They have an uncharacteristic let up against the Raiders, and it should be concerning the fact that they let the Cowboys back into this game. But I said, they're going to right the ship, and they'll be just fine. And I still do believe that the Baltimore Ravens are going to be just fine. They do have a tough schedule. They do have difficult games upcoming. But this was the game that they had to win, and it was a tough place on the road. You couldn't go 0-3, and they find a way to win. And I did find it interesting that Lamar Jackson had some post-game comments that were very poignant, and some could say were pointed at John Harbaugh in terms of them letting their foot off the gas. Lamar said, "I wish they would let us just keep the pedal down." I don't know. What do you think about those comments? I don't know if you heard those or not.
Yeah, I did. If I were John Harbaugh, I would play it up the right way. Yeah. I respect Lamar's opinion. He's been around, man. He knows how to handle stuff like that. Privately, though, I would just encourage my franchise quarterback not to air those things publicly because they do have a divisive effect. And I think you have to feel as though if you're John Harbaugh, you got to feel like we're up 28-6. I've got Derrick Henry. I've got Lamar Jackson. We're going to run the damn ball. And we're going to trust that our defense isn't going to give up 22 points and let Dallas back into the game. that was a bad calculation because the defense did just that. So, I mean, I don't really fault John Harbaugh for the strategy. I think that given the resources that they have, that it was the right approach. You just, if anything, man, you need to come down a little harder on your defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me ask you a question. Something you brought up when you talked about Dallas. You said their week 1 win against Cleveland, which you said maybe doesn't look as good now. Do you play that game after week 3? I'll give you an example. Pittsburgh's week 1 win against Atlanta in Atlanta. Atlanta then rebounds and goes to Philadelphia and wins, and then take the Chiefs to the some might say they should have won the game based on some calls that went the Chiefs' favor. Shocker. But still, do you play that game where you look at prior wins and the quality of win, quality of opponent, or do you just still think this is a week-to-week league in the NFL?
Well, I do think it's a week-to-week league, and I do think that week 1 wins need to kind of be put into perspective because we don't know exactly who's going to be really good. And I think there were a lot of people who felt like the Browns had the potential to be a contender in the AFC. They certainly still do, but Cleveland has gotten out of the gate a lot slower, I think, than people expected. And maybe the dominance that the Cowboys demonstrated in Cleveland in week 1 shouldn't be as surprising as it seemed at the time. And so that's really the only reason I'd say maybe it doesn't look as good, simply because Cleveland, I think, was expected to be a little bit tougher at home in that opener.
You mean like not losing to the Giants at home?
Yeah, that's a tough loss, man. I watched Kevin Stefanski jogging across the field to go shake hands with Brian Daboll there, and I thought to myself, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes right now because you got to go face the media after that. That's a tough one to explain away.
Absolutely. Let's go to our next topic. The Carolina Panthers, a team who obviously was under scrutiny after they benched their number 1 overall draft pick. Still, they were unquestionably the league's worst team through 2 weeks. They put up 36 points behind Andy Dalton, who took over for Bryce Young. Again, they upset the Las Vegas Raiders. Does this result spell the end of Young's career or tenure in Carolina? And if so, where might he register on the list of historic draft busts?
Yeah. Well, I think the first answer is yes. I don't know how they're going to turn back to him. I mean, I wouldn't say that Andy Dalton is going to be lights out now. I mean, the guy's 36 years old. He's only started a handful of games in the last 5 years in the league. You see this happen every once in a while, right? The new guy comes in, gives the team a spark, but then the opponents get some film and they regress. So, I mean, I think Carolina's still got a major problem at the quarterback position. But the fact that he was able to come in and immediately take an offense that just looked absolutely useless and put up 36 points and throw for 300 some yards gives you, I think, an idea about how hamstrung they were by Bryce Young. So I would not be shocked if he doesn't start a game, barring injury, for the rest of the year, and then they find a way to move on from him. What do you think as far as that goes?
I don't know. Like, it's a really interesting topic because you bring up a good point about how the offense isn't going to adjust too much with Andy Dalton in there compared to Bryce Young. But I guess to me, this should be a lesson to a lot of NFL teams that a lot of them are ignoring. At what point are we going to say, as NFL organizations, we're not going to throw even the number 1 overall draft pick into the fire too early? If there's any hesitation that he might not be ready, let's hold him out and let him learn and get acclimated, and then let's put him in. And you can see this happening with Caleb Williams as well. Caleb Williams has been under fire a lot. They are losing games in Chicago. The offensive line is not holding up in front of him. I've seen that song and dance before, and it was called Justin Fields. You look at Drake May, though, in New England. He's getting time to sit. He's learning from Jacoby Brissett. He's getting his feet wet. I feel like they're doing it the right way. I don't know if Drake May is going to be the answer in New England, but I feel like Bryce Young's story, and I'm not about to say that he's a bust just yet because now reports are saying they might go back to him at some point this year, which how awful would that be? But still, I'm not ready to put him in the bust category. But, Coach, I think this lends itself to a larger question of when are they going to learn that you got to let these quarterbacks, even the top pick in the draft, sometimes they need some time to develop.
Right. And it is amazing when you think about some of the biggest draft busts in NFL history, guys like Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf, Heath
Yep.
Schuler, all guys that were taken up top. Uh, it's the same story over and over again. They're all thrown into the starting lineup early. I mean, Jamarcus Russell's he's even worse because he held out. He held out, missed time, and then when they got him in, they kind of threw him right into the starting lineup, and he was bad. It's just a lesson in impatience. I mean,
Yeah.
what is the rush? You've got these guys under contract for 4 and potentially 5 years. Why would you want to put them in before they're ready? And you can ruin a guy like that. I mean, you can ruin a guy to the point where they don't trust themselves in the pocket anymore. Thankfully, I think in Pittsburgh, you're kind of seeing the difference between a structured organization that knows how to develop players versus one that doesn't. And Carolina is a great story in that with Bryce Young.
Let me ask you this next follow-up. Is there a team, let's assume that his tenure in Carolina is over. Is there a team, organization, offensive scheme out there that you would say, you know what? That makes sense. If Bryce Young is going to succeed, and we're not saying that he is, but if he's going to succeed, that's where he would. Do you have that team in mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Well, I mean, Bryce Young is about 5'10", 5'11", and about 185 pounds. And that is small. And I don't know. I mean, there have been smaller quarterbacks that have obviously succeeded. Like Kyler Murray is even smaller at about 5'9", but he's built powerfully and he's very explosive. Like Bryce Young's not explosive. He's not built to do the things Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson does. So whatever system you put him in, you're kind of hamstrung by the fact that he seems to be too small to operate out of the pocket, but not explosive enough to operate. I should have said operate in the pocket, but not explosive enough to operate out of it. So I don't know. Is Miami a fit? I mean, like, can he get the ball out quickly? Can he do some of the things that Tua does? I mean, maybe that's a spot because they run a little bit of a unique system. But anywhere that you're going to try to convert him into a more traditional type quarterback, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, some of the smaller quarterbacks in NFL history, Doug Flutie was 5'10", Kyler Murray is 5'10", Russell Wilson 5'11", Drew Brees might have been 6 feet on a good scale, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Drew Brees was 5'11", but all those guys had a skill set that Bryce Young hasn't shown yet. I'm not saying he doesn't have it, but again, Murray several of those guys, Murray, Wilson, those guys could improv in a way that Young doesn't seem to be able to do. They were also much more thickly built. Kyler Murray's got big hips and legs. Russell Wilson's a thickly built dude. Drew Brees was able to manipulate the pocket in a way that few people of his stature have ever been able to do in the NFL. And Young certainly doesn't seem capable of doing that. When you think about the resources Carolina moved to get him, 2 number 1 picks plus a Pro Bowl receiver in DJ Moore, if they wind up moving on from him this year, that's going to go down as definitely one of the biggest draft busts in history for a single franchise.
I agree, because it's not just that, we just had the number 1 overall pick. We took a shot on a guy and he didn't pan out. Like you said, they moved a lot. Draft capital, players. And you're sitting here and you're talking about, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't sound like this guy's ever going to succeed. There's people that are paid a lot of money to evaluate this talent, and they passed on a CJ Stroud to go get Bryce Young. And that's going to be a huge regret for them. I don't want to belabor that topic too much. We'll see what happens with Bryce Young down in Carolina. Let's go to our next topic. There's several teams that are 3-0. We're recording this before the doubleheader of Monday Night Football. We'll talk about that here in a second. But there's some teams that most people would say are surprisingly 3-0. The Kansas City Chiefs are not one of those teams. Like, them being 3-0 is like, well, it's Kansas City. Seattle Seahawks are 3-0. The Minnesota Vikings are 3-0. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-0. So, Coach, with those 3 teams, which is the most surprising 3-0 team in your opinion?
All right, can I be the homer here, Jeff? Can
Absolutely.
I be the homer and take the Steelers? I mean, I have a feeling you want to talk about Minnesota. I think Seattle's a good story, but I'm not totally surprised given their roster and the schedule they've played so far. I think the Steelers are a surprising 3-0 because people were expecting Russell Wilson to be the starter. He got the lion's share of the reps as the number one quarterback all off season. They've had serious injuries on the offensive line. They're missing their best offensive lineman in Isaac Seumalo. The number one draft pick, Troy Fautanu, might miss the whole season. The guy who was supposed to be the starting center got injured early, and then they had to put the rookie in there. They've been shuffling pieces on that line right and left. Justin Fields now has to come in because Russell Wilson gets hurt. It just felt like the amount of uncertainty that they were facing on the offensive side of the ball was going to cause them to get out of the gate slowly. And they haven't been good on offense, but they're getting better every game. Justin Fields played one of his best games as a pro on Sunday, man, put up good numbers and looked good doing it. And meanwhile, that defense has just been unbelievable. I mean, Pittsburgh's defense is playing absolute lights out football. They held the Chargers to 160 some total yards. They're surrendering an average of about 9 points a game for the season. I mean, if they can continue to play at that level defensively, then they're going to be in it every week. And if the offense keeps progressing the way that it's shown so far, it's not far-fetched to say that the Steelers may be the favorite in the AFC North with a 2-game lead. You're only 3 games in, but those leads matter.
Absolutely. And you think I look at this, and when I look at Seattle, and I'll talk about them in a second before I go to Minnesota, you look at, okay, what has their schedule been? So Atlanta's week 1 in Pittsburgh. They went back-to-back games on the road. I don't care where you're going. That is tough to do in the National Football League. They go to Atlanta and beat Kirk Cousins and Bijan Robinson down in the Dome. Then they go to Denver, a very difficult place to play, and a place where Mike Tomlin has struggled in his career, 1-5 before this week 2 game. And they beat up on Bo Nix. Okay, that's nothing to write home about. But here come the LA Chargers. They're 2-0 at home, Acrisure Stadium. And the Chargers were rushing 197.5 yards per game on the ground with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Greg Roman. What did they do? I think they give up 60 yards rushing in the game. Like, it's unbelievable. It was the first real test, and I think they passed it with flying colors. But let's look at Seattle. Seattle's week 1 win over the Broncos. Bo Nix goes to Seattle. That's a tough place to play. They win 26-20. They had a couple safeties in that game. Week 2, they go to New England, and they win in overtime 23-20. New England, some people believe, just not very good. Then they play a Tua-less Dolphins team at home, and they rout them 24-3 with Skylar Thompson as a starting quarterback. I'm not sold on Seattle. Now, their next week game against Detroit, in Detroit, I think that one is going to be something that somewhat of a litmus test there. Do you believe in this team? Before I get to the Vikings, which is who I think is the most surprising 3-0 team, do you believe in Seattle as a potential playoff team, or is this just a string of not so great opponents to start?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that they started 3-0 because the schedule's been favorable for all the reasons you just mentioned. And they've got talent on that roster. And Geno Smith's a great reclamation story. He's playing good football. He's got great skill position talent there, man. I mean, you got DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett, and I like Noah Fant, the tight end. And then, you got some pretty big names on the defensive side of the ball, Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Jerome Baker, and then obviously Devin Witherspoon. They got a talented roster. They got a head coach in Mike McDonald, who I think is very good. He had a ton of success when he was in Baltimore. So, no, Seattle doesn't shock me. I mean, I'm not sold on them because it's a really tough division. They're going to have to fight it out with the Rams and the 49ers and the improving Cardinals. But I'm not surprised at their start.
If there's a team I can't figure out, it's the team that I think is the most surprising 3-0 team, and it's Minnesota. So week 1, the Vikings shellacked the Giants 28-6, but we all say the same thing, right? It's the Giants. They're not that good. So then they play the 49ers at home in week 2, and they beat them 23-17. And Sam Darnold looks damn good doing it. Thinking, well, that was a shock. So then they're going to host the Texans, CJ Stroud and company coming to town. This is the offense with all those receivers. And even though they're not going to have Joe Mixon, they're still going to be okay, right? No, the Vikings blow their doors off 34-7. Everyone thought that when J.J. McCarthy hurts his knee, that it was over. The season was over. Hammer the under is what Jeff Hartman said about the 6.5 win total for the Minnesota Vikings. They're already halfway there. I got to be honest. I am so surprised with the Vikings. And I don't know where I'm more surprised with Sam Darnold's play, because he's been playing phenomenal, Kevin O'Connell's coaching, or Brian Flores' coaching and the defensive side that is just stymieing these offenses that have been so good in terms of the last 2 weeks when you look at the Texans and the 49ers. What are your thoughts on the Vikings?
I think they are a case study in how important coaching is in the NFL. Man, I've always been enamored with O'Connell. I think he's an excellent head coach. I mean, we've seen Brian Flores can be a little bit boom or bust because if you can figure out how to deal with his blitzes, his mug looks, and all those types of things, then I think you can have some success. But I think Mike Pettin, who is his assistant defensive head coach, is a really good coach. I just feel like they're putting guys in position to succeed. You look at what they're doing with Sam Darnold. Obviously, he's got a wealth of talent at the skill positions as well, with Jefferson and Addison and Hockenson have actually been out a little bit, but they've been able to like shield him from his own weaknesses and maximize his strengths. And obviously, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. I mean, I'm sure our buddy Dave Stefano could tell us a little bit better, but it feels like they've got the buy-in culture, that they're kind of like the circle the wagons culture. And you've got a group of guys that believe in Sam Darnold, and are refusing to allow the setback at the quarterback position to derail their season. I mean, sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes what doubt, when people are all doubting you, what that can do for a team.
Yeah, and Sam Darnold did have to have some evaluation on his knee. I guess he got injured towards the end of the game against Houston. They say he's okay. All tests came back negative. Big game coming up in week 4 where they have the Green Bay Packers, a divisional game. Jordan Love could be back for that game. Should be fun to watch. I'm excited for that one. But let's go to our next topic. The Bears, the Chicago Bears lost to the Indianapolis Colts Sunday in week 3 and are now 1-2 on the season. They had Caleb Williams throw the ball 56 times in that game against the Colts, which included 4 sacks, numerous other quarterback hits. Through 3 games, Williams has attempted 118 passes, which is almost 40 a game, and has been sacked 13 times, which is more than 4 a game. Are the Bears on track to ruin yet another quarterback? What say you, Coach?
I mean, I won't go so far as they're gonna ruin him, but they're off to an inauspicious start for sure. I mean, this is not how you want to start the career of a young quarterback. Getting his brains beat in, putting way too much on his plate, not supporting him with a game plan that maximizes what he does best. I mean, I watched some of that Bears game, and he's making huge mistakes right now. He's holding the ball way too long. He's improvising it way too fast. He's trying to get out of the pocket too quickly. And I don't blame him, man, because some of the time they're running these 5-man protections with 5 guys out in the route, and he's not ready for it. And this is exactly what they did to Justin Fields, man. This is exactly the reason why Justin Fields is now in Pittsburgh, because he couldn't succeed in that type of a system. When you have a young quarterback, protect him, move the pocket, right? Change his launch point, right? Give him opportunities to be supported by a good run game. This is all stuff that Chicago should be doing, and they're not. And honestly, man, with Shane Waldron coming over from Seattle as the new OC after he revived Geno Smith's career, I figured, he'd be a great coach for Caleb Williams, because he knows how to maximize the strengths and minimize the weaknesses of a player, and you just haven't seen it yet.
I'm going to go back to something you had just said about the Minnesota Vikings and why I think the Bears are ruining another quarterback. And that is, you said this is a master class in coaching by Kevin O'Connell, setting Sam Darnold up for success. This is not that. This is not that. If you have a rookie quarterback, I've been saying this to anyone that will listen, go back to 2004 with Ben Roethlisberger. What was the recipe for success? Don't throw it over 25 times. We're going to run the rock. We're going to play good defense. The Bears have a good defense. The offensive line is probably going to be better suited to drive off the ball and try to get the running game going, limit how many throws. 56 throws? 56 throws.
Yep.
I think about Ben Roethlisberger. I think he was in like year 10 before he threw the ball 50 times ever in a game. I know that the league is going into a pass happy league, but this is not it. This is a master class on how to ruin a quarterback. And they've done it so many times. It feels like it's just second nature to them. I just don't know how long that organization is going to tolerate a coach and a GM that just can't get the job done, ruining player after player. And I was around some Chicago Bears fans this weekend, and they were saying how frustrated they were that they're okay with the Caleb Williams pick. They hated the Roma Dunze pick. They thought they should have taken an offensive lineman. They really wanted Joe Alt, who went to the LA Chargers. And it does make some sense. I mean, they've got to solidify the offensive front, and they're not protecting him. You mentioned the sacks and the quarterback hits. Do you think there's any hope there in Chicago?
I mean, not unless they change the philosophy. You look at that. They lost that game 21-16. I mean, that's not like they were down by 3 scores and they had no choice but to throw it. They had 56. They called 56 pass plays and 28 rushes. So 2-1 throwing the ball. Now, they only rushed for 63 yards. So maybe they felt like early on they couldn't get anything going and they had then to lean on the pass. But when you're down, when you're in a 1-score ball game, like you can still lean on the run, man. I mean, they got to commit to that more. They've got some good running backs. DeAndre Swift's a good running back. They've got Khalil Herbert. He's a solid running back. They don't have to put all their eggs in the Caleb Williams basket, but it feels like they're doing that. And I mean, if I were a Bears fan, oh my God, I'd just be like, what are we doing it again? It's like Groundhog Day.
Well, I can tell you that the Bears fans that I was around, they are saying just that. They'll know we are doing it again. And they kept talking to me about Justin Fields being in Pittsburgh. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love that guy so much. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go to our last topic here. The NFL, this is last night when you're hearing this recording, but we're recording this before the Monday night doubleheader. So they're doing these throughout the season where they're doing a Monday night doubleheader, but it's weird. They're not doing it the way they used to do the doubleheader on Monday night back in just a few years ago, where they'd have the East Coast game at 7:30 and a West Coast game at 10. They are doing this at like 7:30 and 8:15, and the games are going to be going on at the same time. What do you think about this scheduling philosophy?
Well, I have 2 thoughts. One, I don't mind both games going on at the same time because especially when, as a Steelers fan, the Steelers aren't playing. And obviously if they were, I would just focus on that game. So now my, kind of my viewing ADD will be satisfied as I can just flick back and forth. I don't mind that. But, I'm also old, Jeff. So, I don't like staying up like super late, knowing I have to get up early and go to work the next day. So in that sense, I'm kind of relieved that there's not a 10 o'clock game because if I wanted to watch that game, I'd be miserable. So I don't know. It's a weird little experiment. I don't understand the rhyme or reason for it, man. Some games are on certain networks, and then I believe, I might be wrong about this, but I was looking at the week 6 schedule and it looked like the second game was only on ESPN Plus. That I don't understand. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I'm sure it is. No, you're probably right.
Yeah, the games are all over the place. And what's the rhyme or reason? I can't quite figure that out.
I don't know. And to me, it cheapens the product because you could, when you're older than I am, but I'm not going to say by how much. But even when I was a kid, there was something special about Monday Night Football, damn it. Like when Monday Night Football and you heard the dun, 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 like everything was, wow, like everyone's watching this game because it's the only game on right now. It's the last game of the week. I feel like having the games at the same time just cheapens it. And so I don't like that aspect of it. But I do hope that at some point, and maybe I'm getting spoiled with my Sunday ticket and YouTube TV where you can watch 4 games at once on a screen. I hope that we could congruently watch both games at the same time. If there's only 2 games, you only got to split the screen down the middle. I'm for watching that because like you said, your football viewing ADD kicks in and you just want to see everything at the same time. But I mean, Coach, you remember Monday Night Football, man. Why would you cheapen that product? That's like legit. Everyone knows Monday nights.
Some of my greatest football memories are of hearing that music that you just referenced.
Yeah.
And then Howard Cosell's voiceover, and just he'd come on, Earl Campbell and the Houston Oilers. And you'd get like, you get all excited as like a little kid for that. And You're right, man. There's so much exposure now, and I think this is true about a lot of things, really, in the world for younger people. That at what point is it no longer special?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, my youth was not Howard Cosell. It was actually Hank Williams Jr.
Okay.
singing, "Are you ready for some football?" A Monday night party. Like, I mean, that's what I remember. So there's so much going on, and I know they're trying to keep fans engaged. They're doing the stupid slime time on Nickelodeon, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, what? At what point are two guys running head into each other not enough to entertain youth? I don't know, but nonetheless, we'll talk about that on another show. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how this Monday night doubleheader goes, and we'll talk about it next week. But let's finish this up with the player profile. Coach, you want to talk about one of the quarterbacks from the worst draft class of all time, the 2022 NFL draft class out of Liberty, Malik Willis, who's now at the Green Bay Packers. Go ahead.
Yeah, man. Malik Willis is having a moment in the NFL, right? I mean, he's made 2 starts now, and Green Bay's gone 2-0. And Malik Willis has thrown a grand total in those 2 starts. This is combined. This is both games combined. He's thrown a grand total of 33 passes in those 2 starts, and he's completed 25 of them. But Green Bay has managed to rush for over 400 yards in those 2 games. Their opponents know that they're not going to put much on his plate. They know Green Bay is going to run the football, and they're doing it anyway. And when they're asking Malik Willis to throw it, he's been really good. And that must have been especially satisfying for him because on Sunday, Green Bay went into Tennessee, where he was an absolute bust, and the Titans had just traded him not that long ago, a couple months ago, to the Packers, and to go into Tennessee and lead the Packers to 30 points and a victory and look pretty good, efficient at least at quarterback while doing it is a nice big you-know-what finger from Malik Willis to the Titans.
Absolutely. I didn't realize, I'm looking at the box score of this game in week 3. Willis threw 19 times, 202 yards, 13 completions, 10.6 average, threw a touchdown. He had a decent game, a quarterback rating of 120.9. He was a leading rusher for Green Bay with 73 yards on 6 carries. He averaged 12.2 yards per attempt in terms of on the ground and a touchdown. He had 2 touchdowns himself.
And in the week before, he was 12 for 14.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just...
I don't think there's a controversy there, but you have a backup. You have a backup plan in case Jordan Love's not ready. Could he beat Minnesota in week 4 if Malik Willis is still the quarterback? That's interesting.
Yeah, Sam Darnold against Malik Willis in a game that's actually intriguing. That feels like
what world are we living in?
Last year, yeah, you'd be like, okay, this is week 16. Both the starters are injured. These teams are both 5-11. But no, man, these are actually good football teams whose quarterbacks are playing good football.
And it's like, what weird universe are we living in? But
Bizarro
still,
world.
It is
Seinfeld
absolutely
Bizarro world.
Good reference. All right, hey Coach, what's coming up on the call sheet? Do you know that?
Yeah. So, I may have on a couple of Eagles fans.
Oh gosh.
The Eagles are 2-1, right? And they're sitting atop the NFC East, and the Eagles fans are furious. they're and more furious than normal. Eagles fans are always in some sort of state of agitation, but there's a growing cry to fire Nick Sirianni. And it's not just coming from Eagles fans. You're starting to hear like national media, ESPN radio this morning as I was driving to work. The conversation was, can the Eagles overcome their head coach? He's made some really bonehead decisions or questionable decisions early in the year. And, I got a couple Eagles fans who are like, I need to come on the call sheet, Coach. I got to talk about this. I may entertain them, Jeff. I don't know. A little teaser. Yes. I don't know if we're going to do it or not. But we'll see.
I'm on board with that 100%, but you got to get them pissed off. Like, I want to hear the rants. Like, I want to hear.
That's easy, Jeff. All I got to do is be like, hey, what do you think about Nick Sirianni? And then I can just turn the mic over to them.
Let's just keep it PG. All right. Good stuff as always, Coach. Thank you for your time. We will see everyone next week on another NFL Whip Round. Take it easy, everyone.